migration pathways that promote and protect the human rights of all migrants, irrespective of their migration status, at all stages of their migration journey. And we should also not forget the importance of the remittances that migrant workers send home when they are working abroad. So I hope that those are some of the topics that will be coming up today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Sarah Hendricks from UN Women to share her opening remarks with us all. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Per, and thank you indeed to IOM and to the other co-hosts for today's event and inviting and including UN Women as part of this important discussion. I'm really pleased to be here and to ensure that we do have a discussion here at the CSW that delves into the critical intersections of poverty, poverty reduction, gender equality, and migration, and where these three components meet and what that means to the lives of women and girls. We know that we've been here at the CSW. It is day 7, if I'm not mistaken, of CSW, and we know about a lot of the large data that's being discussed around women in poverty. 1 in 10 women around the world are currently living in extreme forms of poverty. Poverty which has a disproportionate female face, poverty which is defined essentially by gender phenomena, gender dynamics. Women's poverty, much of what we've heard at the CSW, is shaped by structural forms of discrimination. And these structural forms of discrimination are actually embedded into economies. We all know that economies are not automatically inclusive. By definition, they're not automatically inclusive in the way that they are shaped or generated or driven. And so this in turn influences the embedding of pervasive gender inequalities in society as well. For the most marginalized in society, these are forces that don't just leave women behind, the phrase that we so often hear, but in fact, these are forces that actually push women into poverty and deeper into poverty, acknowledging that it is women who are often pushed first into poverty, into deeper forms or more extreme forms of poverty, and recover last. In response, it is many women who migrate in search of improved livelihoods, in search of decent work, in search sometimes of protection itself. And so we see this conversation today really as a human rights imperative to ensure that migrant women's rights are protected and promoted at all stages of migration. And migrant women recognizing that they make essential contributions to societies around the globe. They bring diverse talent, expertise. They are actually essential parts of global value chains. And this is, I think, their contribution needs to be well recognized as such. We know some of the data on this, that women migrant workers also send substantial portions of their earnings to their families, to their communities. Back home, we see this in the data and how the data shows that women send actually as much or even more than their male counterparts do so in terms of regular remittances. And this is despite gender wage gaps, as well as other gaps in terms of financial literacy or barriers to accessing formal banking or financial services, including mobile money and digital financial services. This money they send back is often that critical lifeline. And so women as migrant workers stand as a critical lifeline to their family, to their friends. It supports livelihoods, supports the reduction of poverty, supports economies to thrive. And yet, in spite of this pivotal role that women migrants play as migrant workers, they face so much discrimination, and discrimination continues to persist. We see that global financial systems to continue to be one of the biggest gatekeepers to migrant women's full and equal participation in so many areas of life. Particularly those with irregular migration status, they are so often unable to access formal banking, financial services, technology, even when there is proof of residency or proof of documentation requirements. Last week I attended a really energizing event actually on financial inclusion. And when the room opened for questions, it was actually a migrant woman who raised her hand and said, I'm from country X, I'm now living in country Y. I have a job, I can't get a bank account. I don't have any documentation, and I simply can't, even a mobile bank account. And that space that she was in was so well articulated in terms of the discussion on financial inclusion as a conduit to broader economic empowerment. So promoting the digital inclusion of migrant women is so vital, to economic empowerment, to their sustainable integration. And we know that concrete measures to increase their access to digital services, digital literacy, to connecting to markets that are actually digital markets, whether that's the gig economy or beyond, to connecting to networks online, connecting into mobile money and digital financial services. We know all of this is critical for their independence, for livelihoods, for increased earnings. So there is this need for gender-responsive laws and policies, services that can create that environment so that women can migrate safely, can contribute meaningfully, can enjoy access to decent work, to social protection, can have their rights supported and protected at all stages of migration, regardless of actual migration status itself. We've seen services such as those provided to returning Ethiopian migrant women, with great thanks to the government of Germany for being part of UN Women's Making Migration Safe program, where these types of services, whether it's psychosocial or healthcare counseling, life skills, basic business skills, seed funding for entrepreneurial efforts in terms of business ownership, is really supporting returnees to achieve their economic empowerment and their independence. So to conclude, but also hopefully to kick off today's conversation, let me just end by saying we do need policies that work for women, that are designed for women's needs. And while migration can be a very powerful tool for poverty reduction and women's economic empowerment, for this to become a real reality for all, we must ensure access to decent work and foster institutions that actually promote the kind of public investment into social goods that are needed with dividend returns in terms of sustainable development. I think this is one of the most important contributions we can make to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of poverty and of migration. So we look forward to the discussion. And now I'd love to turn over to our wonderful moderator, Uloma from UNCDF. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Par, for your opening remarks and for setting the scene, and for really laying the context on the status of women in migration, looking at the different factors around poverty and conflicts and how all of those intersect to influence the lives of migrant women. And so against this backdrop, I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed panelists today as we move into the discussion on what's being done to ensure the adoption of more holistic and gender-responsive approaches to addressing these multifaceted challenges which Sarah and Par have just highlighted. And so first, we're joined by Dr. Gurley Amarillo, the Undersecretary from the National Anti-Poverty Commission of the Philippines. Welcome. Welcome, Undersecretary Amarillo. So my question to you is, how does the Philippines collaborate with stakeholders to address the intersectionality of gender, poverty, and migration? And could you share some examples of successful partnerships or initiatives that have effectively integrated gender-responsive and human rights-based approaches into migration policies and programs, particularly in the context of poverty reduction?
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon to all of you. I will just read, I will answer the question while I'm reading our statement here. The National Anti-Poverty Commission is a very unique agency of our government because the basic sector interplays with the government agencies. We recognize the civil society organization, and of course, the migrant workers is one of them. The relationship between poverty and gender equality and the empowerment of women had been long recognized by the Philippines. much so that our strategies and programs have been built around such. One concrete manifestation of this is the establishment of our National Anti-Poverty Commission of the Philippines, which is globally unique as half of the commission is composed of basic sectors from civil society and the other half from the national and local government units. The other half of this is still to be appointed by our president by next month, including the representative from the basic sector, which is the migrant workers. The president is actually the chairman of the commission, of the National Anti-Poverty Commission. The 14 basic sectors that comprise the commissions are organizing coming from most marginalized sectors of the Philippine society. Namely, these are the farmers and the landless rural workers, artisanal fisher folks, urban poor, indigenous peoples and cultural communities, workers in formal and migrant workers, workers in the informal sector, children, youth and students, senior citizens, persons with disabilities, victims of disasters and calamities, non-governmental organizations, cooperatives, and women. In conjunction with these sectors, our government counterparts spanning departments and agencies on agriculture, Department of Labor, Finance, Budget, Social Welfare, Education, Finance, Housing, Disaster Resilience, Children, Peace and Order, Migration, and Local Governance. This is testament to the Philippines' commitment in confronting the challenges that women in our marginalized sectors face. Is it like the migrant workers to the Department of Migrant Workers, and we support our migrant worker sector, all the technical and administrative support, policy, and everything that they can champion the issues, the challenges facing by the Philippine migrant workers. I believe this principle has also led to significant progress and positive outcomes in recognizing and addressing gender-based issues in the Philippines. The country was ranked second highest in the Southeast Asia for legal and economic gender equality in the World Bank's Women, Business, and Law 2024 report. Similarly, we achieved 16th place in the 2023 Global Gender Gap Index by the World Economic Forum. While these rankings underscore our collective achievements and serve as a source of inspiration to further the cause of women's rights and gender equality, they also remind us of the challenges that still lie ahead. It is evident that there are still gaps we need to diligently work to address, including those affecting women in agriculture, the informal economy, the victims of disaster and climate change, indigenous women, and pertinent to our session, the migrant workers. Our latest census data shows that more than half of all migrants in the Philippines are women, exposing them to the higher risk for abuse and exploitation in comparison to their male counterparts. This is why our efforts to safeguard the rights of migrant women is continuous. In 2023 alone, we've aided over 30,000 migrants needing legal assistance, closed over 600 web pages that were detrimental to the rights and welfare of our migrants, and strengthened our monitoring of migrants entering regions where illegal recruitment is rampant. We are committed to ensuring that migrant women not only have a choice, but rather given opportunities, an opportunity to seek out new ventures elsewhere, and an opportunity to return to the country with a safe, productive, and a stable future. Migrant teachers have the option to work for public elementary school and high school upon their return to the country. Various livelihood assistance and seed capital programs are likewise available for returnees, with a special focus for women whose jobs were affected by hostilities, crisis, termination, disasters, abuse, and illegal recruitment. These interventions are further supported by the recognition of other gender-based challenges in healthcare and child rearing. To this end, a migrant-focused hospital had already been established in the country, providing medical assistance to over 40,000 migrants and their families in the last year. The Overseas Filipino Workers Children's Circle was also established in 2022, and also our Department of Migrant Worker and the Commission on Filipino Overseas. Migrant workers mitigate the social cost of having a parent working overseas. Again, in the last year alone, over 37,000 children of migrants have been scholars, ensuring their completion of their collegiate degrees. We look deeper on the magnitude of poverty in our country, and data shows that more poor families are living in highly urbanized regions and provinces. For example, the richest province in the Philippines has the most number of poor families. This indicates a pattern of migration from rural areas resulting to increase in population of informal settlers in the urban areas, women and girls included. Further, this migration increased the need for social, economic, and ecological services in urban and urbanizing communities such as health, education, food, shelter, jobs, and solid waste management, among others. Currently, there are programs, projects, and services addressing these. Long-term is the decentralization of development opportunities, which will encourage migrants to return to their towns of origin. Creation of more development centers in potential areas will also provide employment and livelihood, thereby preventing further migration. Such decentralized development can likewise increase capacity to provide basic services and will further benefit incapacitated girls and women. With these accomplishments, we are reminded that our efforts must be inclusive and far-reaching. For women in agriculture and the informal economy, we must strive for equitable access to resources, capital, and markets. For those affected by disasters and climate change, our initiative must include gender-sensitive disaster resilience building. For indigenous women, we must ensure their rights and traditions are respected and integrated into our broader gender equality efforts. Our strategies must be multifaceted, acknowledging the diverse challenges faced by women across different sectors and backgrounds. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I am proud to share with you that the National Anti-Poverty Commission is formulating the country's National Poverty Reduction Plan and the National Poverty Reduction Agenda. These foundational documents aim to harmonize all our efforts and create meaningful avenues for participation in governance, while addressing the individual challenges faced by different subsectors of women is important. It is equally crucial that our solutions are as diverse as the challenges themselves. As I conclude, let me share with you that the NAPC, the National Anti-Poverty Commission, through the 14 basic sectors and the 25 national government agencies, is proof enough that diversity is not a hindrance, but an asset that enriches our collective effort and ensure a more inclusive approach to overcoming poverty and advancing gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, may we all embrace the diversity of each of our countries so that the bridges we build not only foster bonds of understanding and compassion, but rather realize a collective bridge for all us to realize a world free from poverty and gender inequality. Thank you, and a blessed day to all of us, champions of gender equality.
Thank you, Undersecretary Amarillo, for those inspiring remarks. I think it's truly inspiring for all of us here in the room to hear more about what the Philippines is doing to adopt this integrated and holistic approach to really ensuring that Filipino migrant women not only have access to more opportunities as they choose to migrate, but also opportunities to thrive once they return to the Philippines. And I'm sure there will be room for questions later on some of the documents that you've mentioned, including the National Poverty Reduction Plan. I can imagine people in the audience would be keen to learn more about how the Philippines is implementing that approach. So again, thank you for your remarks. With that, we'll turn over to our next panelist, Annette Kaiser, the Minister Counselor at the Permanent Mission of Germany to the UN. Welcome, Madam Counselor. As you begin your remarks, we hope that you could use this opportunity to highlight some of the key examples of Germany's initiatives to enhance financial inclusion for migrant women, and how do you see these aligning with gender-responsive and human rights-based approaches to poverty reduction and migration?
Thank you so much to IOM and UN Women for uniting us this afternoon to discuss this very important topic, and also for highlighting all these facts and figures that help us, I think, to better understand the very, very complex topic. Before giving you some examples of what Germany is doing, just one sentence on our policy. We have already heard a lot about the chances that poverty is a key driver of migration, and safe and regular migration can also be a tool for poverty reduction. And yet migrants are more likely to be in or at risk of poverty than non-migrants, and especially women and girls. And this is very clear. And so enhancing the financial inclusion of women migrants must therefore go side by side with ensuring the protection of their rights. And this is reflected in Germany's feminist approach to migration and development. So let me give you some examples. And I start with the topic of safe and regular migration. Through our Centers for Migration and Development, we work with partners in 9 countries worldwide to provide information and advice to potential migrants. These centers help women and other marginalized groups make safe migration decisions and leverage economic opportunities in these countries. And in Ethiopia, as has already been mentioned, the Making Migration Safe for Women project implemented by UN Women highlights the risks faced by women economic migrants, especially in domestic and care work sectors. Even when they migrate regularly, and this I think has also been pointed out by my colleague from the Philippines, these women can be denied basic rights and protections, including access to financial services. To address this and other challenges, this project promotes gender-responsive legal frameworks on a global level. And it also provides comprehensive shelter services to vulnerable women migrants, returnees, and survivors of trafficking and sexualized violence. So it's really a combination. And the women are offered life and business skills training at the same time, as well as access to financing, so they can start their own income generating activities. And they also become more financially independent and gain the knowledge and skills to advocate their rights. A second point that has maybe not been raised so far, but that I find especially interesting is cooperation with diaspora. Germany also recognizes the important contribution diaspora can make to sustainable development and poverty reduction. We have a platform that is called widu.africa. And this platform helps diaspora investors to connect with local entrepreneurs in 6 African countries. And through this platform, 5,500 small businesses have been supported, generating jobs and income. And nearly 50% of these businesses are women-led. So also, I think, a success story. Social remittances, as has already been mentioned, can be just as significant The global program Shaping Development-Oriented Migration supports diaspora organizations, entrepreneurs, and individuals to implement projects and knowledge exchange for sustainable development in their countries of origin. Take, for example, Power South. That is a business, and I like this very much, formed by two women from the Indian diaspora, and they advocate for women in the global South to be co-owners in the green economy, rather than passive beneficiaries of climate projects. So much more active role is given to these women. And interventions like this one make tangible contributions to gender equality and poverty reduction. And thirdly, we believe it is essential to include women and gender diverse migrants themselves in the policy and processes that affect them. Only when women and marginalized groups are part of the debate and not just objects can their needs and concerns be properly acknowledged and addressed. And this is why we are supporting in Germany a group of migrant women to establish an initiative that will strengthen diaspora women's networks, visibility and voice in development policy. Another more prominent example to increase political participation and access to resources for refugee women is the Action Network on Forced Displacement, Women as Agents of Change, which was launched by the BMZ in 2020. And I'm very happy to see that Anila Noor, who is a member of the network, is here with us today. And I look forward to hearing from you, Anila, about your experiences with this network. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Councillor, for shedding light on Germany's feminist approach to migration. I think it was really interesting the point you mentioned about democratizing access to information and resources, which is one of the key things that migrant women need once they land in their host countries. So thank you for sharing that approach. And I think that is a good segue to our next speaker, Ms. Anila Noor, the founder and managing director of New Women Connectors. So Ms. Noor, in your remarks, we would hope that you would address what you see as the systemic inequalities that are contributing to keeping migrant women, in that system of poverty, and how can organizations such as New Women Connectors collaborate with grassroots initiatives to address these effectively, promoting gender-responsive and human rights-based approaches to poverty reduction and migration?
I will start. Nothing about us without us. Because it's very important. We heard our own panel speaker said, we as a woman, we get more affected when we are talking about poverty, when we are talking about migration, when we are talking about climate change, and when we are talking about discrimination and racism. As a woman born in a country like Pakistan and now living in Netherlands, I will be very disappointed to share with you the journey for me as a woman from Pakistan to Netherlands. It stays in a similar challenges, where you struggle to get to be recognized by the system, to get access to the information, to get the opportunities, and even how we can get more validation, acknowledgement. As a woman, we are the leaders. It's very important we are talking about the solution. I will highlight we are just talking about the problems and the gaps. We are not reflecting how and who are making these changes and how we are coming up with the solution. We really need to talk about, is my mic is working? Okay, I'm just making sure my voice is heard. As a New Women Connector, which is refugee and women-led organization, it is led by women who are having this lived experience and who are talking about feminist leadership, who are talking about how we can make systematic change in the system, in the policy domain, and who are not only bringing the women's issues, but the issue which is given by to the woman by this capital colonial world. We are taking the lead, that we are not beneficiary, but we are partners. As a new women connectors, we are coming up the ideas is called infinity approach. And by this infinity approach, we are advocating for a more leadership, mentorship, and we invite all of you to come to reach out to us. We really want to learn from each other and really want to see how we can advance. We don't want to repeat the mistakes or repeat only talking, but how we can advance the action, to put into the action. That's why I'm super happy to be, I'm one of the chairperson from the Action Network, where we are really taking the lead. We are getting and giving very difficult time to BMZ, where we are saying we really need more flexible funding. We really need long-term investment, and how we can translate this UN language to the communities and they feel part of this solution. And lastly, I will also want to say that how we can work as a knowledge broker in the UN system, how we can part of the country delegation as a knowledge giver, not only taker, but how we can feel part of this journey. Because till today, we are missing the intersectional lens. We are missing how we can understand each countries, each region. They have their own specific problem, but also solution. We, as a women-led organization, we are defining what is problem according to us. What is the solution for us and how we can part of this solution to make the responsibility. So I will say thank you so much, and I am because we are.
Thank you, Ms. Noor, for bringing that conversation back to that key point that it is important to see women not just as beneficiaries, but as partners in this process, and how important it is for their voices to be included at all stages in the decision-making process to ensure that, indeed, these systemic inequalities and challenges that women face, wherever they end up migrating, can indeed be addressed in a sustainable way. I think with that, we will turn to our next speaker, Ms. Adriana Paz, the General Secretary of the International Domestic Workers Federation, which is a member of the Women in Migration Network. So, Madam General Secretary, as a trade union federation, what role does the International Domestic Workers Federation play in safeguarding the rights of women migrant workers, particularly in informal employment? And could you share specific strategies by your organization to address these vulnerabilities faced by migrant women in the labor market?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chair. First of all, I would like to start by saying that the approach that we take on addressing migration and poverty, it needs to be reframed. Instead of, we believe, migrant domestic workers, migrant workers, that instead of managing poverty or managing micro interventions to provide financial support to migrant workers, we really have to look at the driving causes and root causes of migration, which is the dismantling of national economies, social protection and public good being destroyed, privatization driving forces. All of that contributes to the dismantling of national economies, which pushes people away. Climate change, wars and occupations are all those driving factors for people to go to the global north and to seek a livelihood and a safety. If we do not look at what is really causing poverty, we're just going to be managing and administering poverty and migration, and that's not the solution. When we talk about how to really make interventions from the point of view of the migrant workers themselves and the point of view of organized society and organized labor, we really are talking about what are the strategies that really guarantee and put the voices and the safety of the migrant workers in migrating. Of course, we do believe in the right to migrate, in the right to return. But this needs to be done from a human rights perspective and a labor rights perspective. There is no way that migrant workers are going to have labor rights in other countries if immigration policies are not adapted and adjusted to those needs. When we are talking about, for example, granting safety and security to migrant workers, if they don't have the right to stay in the country because they don't have an employment contract and they can be deported, that is condemning migrant workers to be permanently under fear and to accept slavery conditions. And this is what is happening right now. So if immigration policies and labor policies are not really talking to each other from the point of view of labor and human rights, we're just going to keep migrant workers being under a second subclass of citizens, not even citizens. We are seeing from more than 40, 50 years bilateral agreements that bring migrant domestic workers, agricultural workers, construction workers from the global south to the global north. And we see that these bilateral agreements are often framed as low-skilled temporary workers. And we see that the countries in the global north are using these low-skilled temporary workers for over 60 years. There is nothing temporary about that, and there is nothing about low skill. These are just categories to justify exclusion, stripping workers from their civil rights, human rights, and labor rights. And we see that this way of managing migration is not solving the problem, but is actually opening the door to illegal recruiters, to labor trafficking, to slavery conditions, to forced conditions. Domestic work is one of the top 5 occupations where there is forced labor and where there is child labor. Yet, we see the countries in the global north that depend entirely on migrant domestic workers. In the United States only, there is 71% of migrant domestic workers, 71% domestic workers that are performing and fulfilling the needs of care of this society. In the Arab countries, 83% of the care providers and domestic workers are migrants. In Europe, it's 55%. So, they are often traveling and under unsafe working conditions and migration, but also under these bilateral agreements. Being the most dramatic example, the kafala system that really basically keeps under forced slavery conditions to migrant domestic workers. And these are mainly women from countries from Africa, from regions from Africa and South Asia and Southeast Asia and many from the Philippines, mister. And they are in slavery conditions. The interventions done in a most successful way are the interventions done when workers organize. So freedom of association and the right to organize and to be represented is paramount to really address seriously these conditions. Migrant domestic workers and migrant workers are not allowed to unionize. You need to wonder why. And if governments are bringing these temporary workers in a permanent basis, why not granting them permanent residency status? Because they are building community and they are sustaining the local economy and the economy back home. Yet, all this at the back of tremendous exploitation and ripping families apart because they are not allowed to bring their kids. Domestic workers leave their kids at home to go and take care of the kids in the global north in the absence of public care policies, which is all we're talking today at the CSW. So on behalf of migrant workers' rights, on behalf of migrant domestic workers, construction workers, farm workers, we really echo nothing about us without us. There is no safe migration. Immigration policies are not in sync with the needs of the labor market. Let's not be hypocritical about it. They are not low-skilled workers. They are not temporary workers. They are the backbone of the economies in the global north. So we need macro approaches and systemic approaches to poverty elimination and not only administrating and managing migration to microfinancing. That is not going to solve the problem, and we have seen that this is getting worse and worse and worse. And we're getting to the point where we don't have the luxury to not really make interventions. And here's where we, civil society and unions, can really come forward and support. We have successful examples when we have been rescuing domestic workers, preparing ourselves to really intervene, to really solve. But if structural conditions that not allow us to really support these workers and to basically rescue them from forced labor conditions, because we have migration policies that are inhumane, because we don't have labor rights for these workers, there is very little room that we can do without your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I think that was indeed, a difficult topic to address. Really looking at the fact that we cannot talk about the labor rights of migrant workers, including women, without an honest examination of the policies under which they're immigrating and the reasons for which they're choosing to migrate from their home countries in the first place. So thank you again for those remarks. I'm sure that there will be questions from the audience once we get to that section of this conversation. But last without not least, I'd like to hand over now to Ms. Angelica Mendez-Launi, the Director of Development and Strategic Partnerships at Women's World Banking. Ms. Launi, reflecting on Women's World Banking's long history of working with financial institutions, how can financial inclusion initiatives be tailored to address the unique needs of migrant women and contribute to broader efforts in poverty reduction and gender equality?
Thank you, Uloma, and thank you to the organizers for including Women's World Banking in this event. I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to share our perspective here in this forum on how we can address the unique financial needs of women migrants. I represent Women's World Banking, a 45-year-old organization supporting women's economic independence through financial inclusion. Women's World Banking was born out of the recognition that women's rights can't be realized unless women have control over their own finances. Today, we work to achieve this goal in 3 ways. We do research to articulate how women are economically empowered when they can access and use financial services. We advise governments who want to invest in women's leaders and implement policies that promote women's financial inclusion. And we advise financial institutions who want to design financial solutions that work for women and serve their needs. And I'm going to focus on this last part with my contribution today. So what is the problem and what is the opportunity we're looking at? I just want to name a few points to illustrate that. We've already heard there are more than 280 million migrants in the world, and almost half of them are women or girls. It's a number likely to increase. And migrant women specifically face a number of obstacles in accessing financial services and products. They have mobility constraints, they are time poor, they often live in unsafe areas, lack financial literacy, have limited access to technology. Many of them also lack the confidence or digital skills to use a mobile phone, or are constricted by social norms or legal barriers, such as identification requirements, as we've already heard from Sarah before. High transaction fees charged by international money transfer operators are also more likely to deter women. So it's no surprise that migrant women, more than men, tend to use informal channels to send money back home. There are also barriers on the side of the financial institutions. Many don't see migrant women as a profitable customer segment, or simply don't know how to serve low-income women. But the data clearly shows that serving migrant women is not a charity case. It makes financial sense. In Bangkok alone, for example, 600,000 migrant women workers from Cambodia's poorest provinces send up to $2 billion back to Cambodia each year, which is a vital flow to families and the economy. So how can financial inclusion initiatives be tailored to address the needs of these women? In our approach, first, we need a financial institution that is actually interested in serving this customer group. And second, the migrant women need to be at the center of how the financial service is designed. At Women's World Banking, we use a women-centered design approach that includes women from customer research to piloting to make sure the solution works for her and is profitable for the financial institution. We used this approach with domestic migrants in Indonesia, where we worked with one of the largest digital wallets, Dana, and with Cambodian migrants in Thailand, where we worked with Wingbank in Cambodia. And here's what we discovered while designing those solutions. Financial education programs that raise awareness about the risks of using informal channels and the benefits of formal services are a key starting point. Also, using the right messaging to attract migrant women's attention and assure them that the solution is actually meant for them is important. So in Indonesia, we used language that makes migrant women feel appreciated and mentioned the purpose of their sending money. For instance, we called the program for Domestic Helpers and included taglines that mentioned sending money to their family, their village, or just back home. And that helped them to understand the benefits and the value of using the service. Also, the right approach to encourage her to open and use the account or the financial service and to ensure she quickly understands is crucial. In Indonesia, the more tech-savvy migrant women were able to sign up for the Dana account themselves based on videos and tutorials, while others relied on their employers, or in Cambodia on group leaders who acted as informal agents for help with signing up and explaining how they can send money home. And this actually illustrates what we often find in our work, that many women prefer to have what we call a human touch when signing up and learning to use a financial service. Dana also sent reminder messages and offered 10 free transfers a month, which encouraged migrant women to use their service regularly and consider it convenient. And finally, digital wallets can transform remittances into an entry point to financial services for migrant women. They provide them with a fast, easy, reliable, safe, and inexpensive way to send money home and access other financial services in the long run. If transacting is made easy there, women's confidence in digital capability grows, and they will want to explore other services. Migrant women who use the Dana account for remittance payments soon started using it to pay for bills, phone top-ups, and online shopping. Some even started using its short-term savings feature, in fact, almost 30%. So what does this mean? When migrant women actively use financial services, they gain greater control over their finances, which increases their financial health and resilience. They become more independent, they have greater self-confidence and decision-making power and increased influence in their communities. Economies will also benefit significantly. 42% of remittance payments still occur offline. So there's a tremendous opportunity in front of us. To seize that opportunity, we need to increase our efforts to offer channels that are safe, fast, and affordable, enable her to access technology, and build digital skills, and continue to address regulatory barriers, such as access to IDs. I will stop here and show you a short video just released yesterday in time for this panel, where you can meet Srena, a Cambodian migrant worker in Thailand, and see firsthand how the solution that Wingbank developed worked for her. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the funders who supported this work, the Impact Linked Fund for Gender Inclusive Finance, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, and the Austrian Development Agency. Thank you very much.
យើងផ្ញើទៅបងដល់ពេលទៅម្ចាស់ខាងធនាគារខាងខ្មែរគេអត់ទទួលគេអត់លើកហើយពេលយើងទេទៅបញ្ជាក់ថាយើងផ្ញើលុយរយៈពេលម៉ោងប៉ុណ្នេះប៉ុណ្នេះអញ្ចឹងគេថាអត់ឃើញពេលខ្លះយើងពិបាកបាត់លុយបាត់កាក់យើងដែរធម្មតាកម្មការនេះដែលតែធ្វើការនៅឯប្រទេសថៃនេះពេលណាដែលគាត់ទេប្រាក់មកក្រុមគ្រួសារគាត់តែងតែទេតាមអ្នកទី3ដោយមិនមានប្រព័ន្ធត្រឹមត្រូវមានន័យថាការផ្ទេររបស់គាត់មិនមានសុវត្ថិភាពទេ ក្នុងការតាក់ទាញកម្មការនីឲ្យមកប្រើប្រាស់សេវាកម្មស្របច្បាប់ត្រឹមត្រូវគឺយើងនឹងធ្វើការពង្រីកបណ្ដាញដៃគូបន្ថែមដើម្បីផ្ដល់ភាពងាយស្រួលធ្វើម៉េចឲ្យបទពិសោធន៍ក្នុងការផ្ទេរប្រាក់របស់គាត់មានភាពងាយស្រួលជាងមុនលឿនជាងមុនដើម្បីជាទំនុកចិត្ត
When there are nearly 1 billion women unserved or underserved by formal financial services, it means that we need to more listen to their voices One of the way in the women-centered design approach that we use, we put women as the center of the solution, but also we consider the business side for the partner, because we wanted to make sure that the solution is not only effective for the women, but it is also generating a good revenue for commercial viability for the partner. That's how we can make sure that the solutions will be continuously delivered.
ដល់ពេលឥឡូវខ្ញុំផ្ញើផ្ទាល់គឺមួយផ្លែតគឺដល់ផ្ទះតែម្ដងផ្ញើលុយទៅតាមនេះទៅវាងាយស្រួលជាងយើងអត់ចាំបាច់ខាតថ្លៃទេទូរស័ព្ទច្រើនដងយើងអត់មានខាតច្រើនយើងអស់តែមួយតង់គឺដល់ផ្ទះតែម្ដងវាអត់យូរដូចកាលពីមុនអញ្ចឹងណាលុយថ្ងៃនេះថ្ងៃណា
Thank you, Angelica, for those remarks and for sharing more about Women's World Banking's women-centered design approach to financial services. And I think that really underscores the key points that have been raised across the discussions today. I think it's really that about how do we keep migrant women at the center of this entire process to really understand, who they are, what their needs are, and how we can design services that meet, that include their voice, that take into account their skills, but that give them access to a wide variety of choices. So that ultimately we can ensure that they have access to the information that they need to make the best decisions on when to migrate, how to migrate, and if they choose to return, and what will be waiting for them when they return. Again, thank you to all of our speakers for all of the insights that you've shared here today. We do have time for question and answers. We have about 15 minutes. So at this time, I'd like to again just, thank, just a warm welcome, round of applause for our speakers, and then we'll launch into the Q&A. Okay, so we'll be taking, I'll try to make sure that I call on people in the order in which they've raised their hands. Forgive me if I don't. But I see a hand from this gentleman here, lady there, there, and there. So we'll take those 4 questions to start with. Please state your name, your organization, and who your question is addressed to.
Hello, I am Brahmo from Single Supermom, a nonprofit. I was wondering, what we often see is that childcare services come into conflict with the or with women's emancipations, in the sense that oftentimes childcare services, especially when informal, they sort of give the burden of reproductive labor and care tasks to other women who are oftentimes more marginalized. And so in this context, I'm wondering, how can we ensure that there's no conflict between emancipation of women by providing childcare services, formal and informal, and the rights of migrant women who often take up those kind of care jobs in the care economy? Thank you. To whomever wants to reply.
You were asking the care, the children left by the migrant worker?
No, the other way around, which is that oftentimes it seems there's a conflict in emancipating more or less marginalized women by using childcare services, which can give the burden of reproductive labor to more marginalized women. And so I'm wondering, what are your ideas regarding resolving such a conflict?
Women Immigration Network. Yeah. Apologies first, Adriana had to leave. Her event is happening right now as well. I'm Carol Barton, and I'm one of the co-coordinators of the Women Immigration Network. It's a really good question, and it's one of the ones that we think is central in terms of the care economy, that women in countries that don't have adequate child care are relying on migrant women to do that child care. And I think that it it calls for the need of reconstructing the social organization of care and understanding that women's unpaid work in the household needs to be recognized through robust quality public services, through paid family leave, through state provision of quality child care, and the remuneration, adequate remuneration of the child care providers, be they from the country itself or migrant women, so that if those workers, as Adriana was saying, who too often are described as unskilled workers, when in fact it requires a high level of skill, if they were paid adequately and it was a competitive role in society in terms of decent work and good wages, then it wouldn't be an exploitative situation. Many people might choose to go into childcare because it would be a good job. So that's what we're calling for, both valuing the labor rights of the providers, be they migrants or domestically, and also valuing the unpaid work of women in the household.
Thank you for that question. May I ask that you please keep your questions concise? Please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Lillian. I'm from the Zongta International, Taiwan. In Taiwan, because we are moving toward aging society, we hire a lot of migrant care workers. Now it's about 8,000 migrant workers in Taiwan. I really appreciate someone talking about it's not temporary worker. It's permanent worker. Because without them, this Taiwan's caring society would suffer a lot. So we highly appreciate the migrant worker policy, which has been developed all over the world. And I just want to get 1 minute talking about how important to help migrant workers to be adapted to the culturally inclusive society. First one, we have to do a social security program for them. So minimum wage policy has been developed. So all the minimum wage policy is the same as the migrant worker as local people. So in Taiwan, it's unique. Every migrant worker share the same minimum wage policy as local people. Secondly, Taiwan spend a lot of money for social investment because every migrant worker is the asset of the society. We need to help them to be capable to doing their work in terms of language proficiency and anything. And now this policy is so important. We call social investment. Without them, they cannot be the permanent worker, a permanent labor force in our society, because Taiwan has been open to all the migrant worker can be applied as a permanent worker. Yeah, we used to be the temporary worker as a temporary worker, but now, no. The national policy has been changed because we highly appreciate diversity and inclusive society right now. And thirdly, it's so important in our society. We find out social empowerment and social acceptance society, because we need a non-discriminatory society developed. Sooner or later, this society should be diverse. But how is the people in Taiwan can accept migrant workers? So all the same process doing that empower society to be a cultivative, migrant acceptive society. So this is something we have doing. So we call 3S. First one, social security. Second one, with social inclusion programs for the social investment program. Last one would be like social acceptance or non-discriminatory society need to be developed. So, but now one very difficult question is, how to take care of undocumented kids, undocumented babies, because migrant workers are not allowed to bring a family to our society, but they have sexual drive. And most of kids born in Taiwan, it's really hard to get citizenship, except they are recognized as a citizen. Father is Taiwanese. Or mother say, this is my kids, they were sent back to the original countries. Otherwise, it's kind of burden in Taiwan right now, how to help unborn baby to be the citizen in the future. Next, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think that it ties back to the points that were raised earlier about really looking at examining the immigration policies of different countries, but I think that might be a bit beyond the remit of this. But I invite you to approach the speakers afterwards to sort of hear their personal viewpoints. Thank you again for that question. We'll take her and then her. Again, please do keep the comments or questions brief.
Thank you so much. My name is Sandra Awajibrenya, originally from Ghana, but I live in Germany. And okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so my name is Sandra Awajibrenya, originally from Ghana, but living in Germany. I work for NGO Women Federation World Peace International in Geneva, UN Geneva. So my question right now is, when we are talking about migrants, are international students included? Because I'm working on an initiative which is called Human Rights Arise in a Cell, which I encourage female students not to drop out of school or from their university. We are encouraging female students to go to school, especially female students to go to school, but we neglect the part where they drop out. The dropout is very increasing, very alarming at the moment. Talking about Germany, their migration, even to get to an appointment to the Foreign Office is an issue. These students are really having hard time getting appointment to extend their visas. Also, there is a limited visa term that most are giving to them. That's 6 months. If it's not extended and they have failed their exams, most of the time that means they have to be taken back home. So these female students end up being pregnant to have kind of to stay in Germany or look for illegal ways to stay in Germany. So my question is, can there be any policies that can really support these female students? Because I feel like they are being left behind. They are not having enough support. If there could be any policies for these female students, maybe like kind of having a place to stay in the first 3 months for them to be stable in Germany, to have job opportunities, because also the job hours that is given to them is also sometimes limited. And if their visas are not extended, I have a case where the employer decided not to pay her because it was like, okay, now you do not have a visa and I cannot extend, I cannot give you your pay. And these are like struggles that these female students are going through. If we could have some policies made for these female students. Thank you very much.
I have to admit I'm not a migration policy expert, so I'm not in a position also here to speak on this behalf for the German government, but it's very interesting what you are presenting. I could give you my address and you could send me a little bit more details, and then we can see if I can forward it to my colleagues in Berlin. This is what I can offer, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you again, Madam Pastor. Thank you for that question. We'll take one question and then one final question.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. It is very sad. My name is Beyonce Karungi. I'm originally from Uganda, and I'm immigrating here. But it's a shame. All the presenters, nobody has talked about LGBTQ, no human rights. These are human rights. We are being forced from our countries because of criminal laws. You know, I'm immigrating here, but it is really hard to get here. First of all, to get into the system, getting a job, it's very hard. You have to get an ID, you have to get a work permit, also accessing healthcare services, it's very hard. When you come, the weather is it is cold. It's not like how we live in Africa, it's hot. Many things change up. The living expenses are very expensive. You can't move from here. You need fares on the Metro card, stuff like that. My concern goes to the UN migration. Is there any way, or UN women, is there any way how you can support immigrants who are already here, or you support those in camps? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I think it goes back to, again, a point that was raised earlier around really looking beyond the migration policies, but also the reasons why people are, causing migration from, the home countries. And I think you do raise a good point. And yes, that is one that was not specifically brought up here today, the issue of the concerns of the LGBTQ community, but I think when we look at gender and inclusion, we're really talking about that intersectionality across, different genders, different cultural, social classes, and I think that is part and parcel of that. And I think I would invite you to also reach out to the UN Women representatives, also from IOM, that are in the room to maybe address some of those specific questions, and they can talk you through some of the initiatives that they've seen, ongoing here or in the countries where they're present. So thank you again for that question. I think we have time for one final question. I'm going to, we'll just go,
Thank you. My name is Bezawit. I am from Ethiopia. I actually wanted to just add one point because the Making Migration Work for Women program has featured in this panel, and that is the aspect of data and statistics, sex disaggregated data, because that is one component of the project as well, where we need to understand the trends, the numbers, the needs aspects, and so that aspect of it, of having a gender and migration survey, that's what we're going to be doing in Ethiopia, for example, to understand the data and the numbers is important. So I just wanted to put that out. Thank you.
Thank you again, and apologies if we weren't able to address your question specifically. The panelists, if they choose to, will remain, back a bit, and I invite you to please come and approach them and ask any questions that you were not able to share here today. As we move to close today's discussion, again, thank you to our esteemed panelists. I think we've heard a lot about, specific strategies that are being taken at the country, but also at the regional level to address the issues at that intersection of gender, poverty, and migration. And I think what's been outstanding for me is that really we're seeing that it's going to take collaboration across different sectors, across different governments, across borders to really advance more gender responsive and human rights based approaches to poverty reduction and migration. And I think what stood out to me was really the need to amplify the voices of migrant women, to continue to advocate for policy reforms, and to foster inclusive partnerships such as the ones that we've seen on display here today. So I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the panelists, to all of you in the audience. Let us carry forward the momentum generated today and continue to work towards a future where every migrant woman is empowered, respected, and able to thrive. I would also like to extend my gratitude to IOM for spearheading this event, to the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, to the Permanent Mission of the Philippines to the United Nations, to UN Capital Development Fund, UN Women, and the Women in Migration Network for their gracious co-sponsorship. Thank you again.